that we do that we integrate with that aren't really demonstratable because they happen on the back end. But as far as an organization goes, we've been working for 20 plus years in the K-12 space, taking school districts paperless. That's really what our focus is and what we do. So we've got a lot of experience in that area. As I mentioned earlier, we're headquartered out of Atlanta, Georgia, and work with a lot of PowerSchool clients. Now, where and how do we help? So for most PowerSchool SIS districts, we generally jump into the process post-registration. So if you think about the journey of your students into, or I should say in the district, most, and I guess I should ask a show of hands, are y'all all using some sort of online registration? No? Okay.
We only have 400 kids.
Okay, all right, that's fine, yeah. So I should say that, yeah, from a district perspective, most of the larger districts are using some sort of online registration, and that's great, especially post-COVID, right? During the COVID process, that was the number one area where people were like, okay, well, I can't even come into the district, how do we register? So a lot of online registration there. But what we also do is we work beyond the attachment functionality. So if you're using PowerSchool enrollment or even some of the other registration process, products, the documents will flow into that solution because parents will, upload proof of residencies, birth certificates, things like that, and then they will. Sometimes they'll just stop, right? They just stay inside of the enrollment product with our solution, or they will flow into PowerSchool via the attachment functionality. Is that familiar? Is that sort of what you guys are doing? No. So you capture documents through PowerSchool enrollment, they flow into attachments? Okay, yeah, okay, all right. So where we pick up the story is after that registration process. That's really where our solution starts to be used in school districts. Also, if you want to take a look at more of a district-wide or an enterprise approach for documents and records management as opposed to just an individual department. So the same technology, we're not going to go into, obviously because of the nature, the same technology works for human resources, for digital employment documents, works for finance, for improving accounts payable processes, and for student records. Today we're just going to focus on student records. Also, when we talk about workflow and electronic forms beyond what is generally considered to be part of the information in PowerSchool. So we talk about parents filling out some forms. You may be using eCollect for that. That's great. If you're not, we can provide you with an alternative for that also. So when we say beyond the access, what we're really talking about is providing a district-wide approach into documents. So when we look at attachments, it's sort of a one-way, like I got to go to this student, I got to go to this record, and that's how I can see that information. I don't have a view into the entire district. And so when we want to take a look and say, okay, well, what documents do I have? More importantly, what documents am I missing? Right? So am I actually in compliance? That's when districts will pick up a solution like ours. And when we talk about bulk capture, not just an individual, I've got a document here or there, so on and so forth, that's where we come into play. All right, so let's jump out of here. Oh, I want to talk about one more quick slide. And this is, because again, a lot of this happens on the back end. This is one slide I'll just point out. All of these areas are places where school districts either create documents or capture documents. The challenge is that in many cases, the document will stay in that individual application. Or so if I'm using Google Forms, for example, right? Those forms are going to stay in Google Docs or in my Google Drive until I may have to print them out. If I'm capturing documents in online enrollment, they're staying there, or in PowerSchool. When I print report cards and things in PowerSchool SIS, they're staying there as attachments. So what we want to do is provide a more integrated approach and take all of those documents and store them in a single place. So that's our vision, is you have anything that is a form, a document, or a piece of paper, that is related to a student can be found in a single location. Now, that's not saying that we're going to keep it there, right? We can provide access to it through other sources, but if it's created and stored and captured, we want to store it in one location, because then I can make sure it's stored securely. No one else has access to this information. And then I can also set retention policies against those documents. So when my state mandated retention schedule expires, I can delete the documents. All right, any questions about that? And we'll jump into the software now. Okay. And again, please, this is a small group. This is a small crew. If you guys have questions, if you want me to go into anything any deeper, or something along those lines, please feel free to stop me. So when we talk about student records, the most common place we're going to jump into is the filing cabinet, and this is basically just a view into a way to store and manage these records in a familiar format. So if I look at, let's go into Julie Adams' folder here. So inside of our software, and again, this may be difficult for you guys to see in the back, we can take all of your student records and organize them into folders by student. Now or we could start and say, well, we're going to organize them by grade first and then student, or by campus first and then student. For smaller districts, just by student's probably okay. For larger districts, maybe we need to divide it by campus first and then by student. So I can take and I can structure these folders, and you can see in any form or fashion that makes sense to us in how our users are going to access them. So if I wanted to look at Julie Adams' record, I can see I have two subfolders. So one is the student folder here, and I'm going to try to give myself, I'm limited by the resolution of this projector here, so I'm going to try and give myself a little more real estate. But when I look in Julie Adams' folder, I can see that all the documents only that I have access to are located in her folder. And as a demonstration system, we've sort of divided this into cumulative records, which are things that are on a more permanent basis, and then just a student folder, which could be things that are more of just like a working basis. So things that we may only need to keep till the end of the year or something like that. Now, if I'm going to go through this also very quickly, and I don't, not everyone has the ability to delete documents, but I'm just going to remove a document that we're expecting to have in Julie's folder, so you can get a sense for something else we can do, which is when I remove a document that is supposed to be in the folder, I have a little notification in red there saying that, hey, we're expecting to see a home language survey in here, and it's not there. So it's a visual reminder that, hey, this folder is incomplete. Now, the folders don't have to be set up every time you have a new student come in. When a new student is enrolled in PowerSchool, the folders will automatically be created. Now, of course, in the very beginning, they're going to be all red, right? Because I don't have all the documents yet. But as the documents begin to process through the registration piece, or if parents are delivering those to the district, or even uploading those, it will start to fill in. Any questions about? Certainly.
I'm curious. Okay, so now I have a student that is going to transfer to another school district. Can I just forward this file, or do they need to have this program in order to accept the file? Or do I need to print the whole entire file and, hard mail it?
Great question. We're going to get to that in about 5 minutes or so.
Okay.
Yeah. So how do I provide access? Thank you very much. Wow, that's awesome. Appreciate it. So how do I provide access to these records to other districts or other campuses and so on and so forth? If they're another campus in the same district, it's easy. They just automatically have access to it.
PowerSchool.
That's exactly right.
Okay,
Yep.
so I'm talking
outside of the district. Absolutely. I'll show you how we manage that in just a second. Okay, let me show one more thing from a folder view, only because I think this is something else we deal with quite a bit also. If I can move that out of the way. Wow, this, my apologies. The projector is really messed up with all my resolutions, so all my nice saved things are not working correctly. If I have Julie's home language survey on my desktop, or if I have it, it got sent to me via an email, and I just drop and drag it into that folder, that's all I need to do to be able to save that document. Okay, I'm just going to go through and then tell OnBase what it is. So it's a home language survey. And then I can just import it, and you'll see that once it's imported, that will no longer show up as read. Right? So just dropping and dragging documents into the software is a lot easier than file, save as, and then file, upload. Where did I do? Oh, what did I name that thing? Click it, and then uploading it that way. So we love the drop and drag capability. It's just something that is inherent with the software. Okay, since we're talking about that, how do we transfer records? And I'm actually going to grab a seat here. This is a little more involved. All right. So the first step in a record transfer process is generally going to be some sort of a request, right? So I have either another district or I have someone outside the organization requesting these records. So what we're doing here is this is just a straight electronic form. They can download this from your website. They can access this. If they're not going to be authenticated into your domain, but generally, so this is available on the website. They may need to attach some authorization. So if we wanted to say, okay, well, who are you? Like, why are you requesting this? Why should I give this to you? You can have them require that. We can even capture signatures if we need to as well. Once that form is submitted, it will go to the next step in the process, which will be generally some sort of a review. Once you've looked at this information and you agree this person should have access to those documents, we will send out an email with a link to the documents where they can go in, and I'll just click the link and show you. They can go into our secure file share and access the records that you've provided them with access to. So now, what we could have done through here also, this is different from state to state and district to district. In some cases, these are automatic. Like if it's a cumulative record, just to send these, and so it's a one-step process. In other districts, they want to be able to select which record they send out, and so we could have had an intermediary step where we pop up a checklist. And you say, okay, this, then this, and this go, and that's it. But regardless, what you were able to do is you are able to determine the password, so we can secure it or not. You can determine the duration, so how long do I want these documents to be available online. And if at any point in time in the process also, you can go through and take a look at the activity, and this is everything that's happened in this document online. And you can even, if you wanted to, just create a task for that person, and this would happen without you having to do anything else, where they have to go in and say, yep, I've received, yes or no. They click that, and that's now part of this process as well. We do use this in some cases also in the reverse mechanism, where if I have a series of documents that I want that I need to capture from people, we can utilize this secure cloud-based system to where they can upload them to my system, and then they'll automatically flow down into the document management solution. So it's bi-directional. We're not just publishing, but we can also receive documents this way also. And the common example for that is something along the lines of let's see, like a new hire folder. And this is again just a simple example, but you can just say, hey, here's your offer letter, start there, and then your I-9, then 4, and so on and so forth. You may be using a talent management system that does this. It's just an example of some of the things we can collect this way. Yeah, great question, though. Thank you for that. Okay, jumping back into the document management software. So one of the things we want to find out is, okay, well, great. Now that it's awesome that you're able to capture these documents, but how do I provide access to them? And directly from within PowerSchool SIS, there's a couple of different ways we can do this. And actually, I shouldn't say the couple, there's hundreds of different ways we can do this. It just depends on where it makes sense in your district. What a lot of districts will do is they will either hijack, customize the attachments link, and they'll create a URL that will call our software, and I'll show you what it does. So they basically click on it, and it will retrieve the documents that are related to this student or this record. So I was on Emmy Alberg's record. I click on that link, and it just pops up the records that I have access to based upon how I'm authenticated in the software. So if I want to go through and say, okay, well, again, Amy's birth certificate, we can just click it there, and then it will pop up, and I have access to it. Now, depending upon whether or not you're on-prem or hosted, we can also pop this into a web page as well. So there's a question yesterday about, can we surface documents through the parent portal? And the answer is maybe. Some of the guys were sitting there and they were literally kind of talking through it while we were in session. And I'm not going to say that we can until we actually test it and vet it, but there does seem to be a way that which we could do that based upon what and I didn't know, to be perfectly candid, I wasn't aware that they are able to put URLs inside of the, if we're familiar with URL, like what I'm talking about, just a web address. Okay, yeah. So they are able to add those into the parent portal. And so that's an interesting new idea. That's why we love coming to these conferences. Any questions about what we're doing there?
So the software that you're using, Windows only, or is there a Mac version?
The Mac is the web version. Yeah, so it's from a comparability perspective, it is. I forgot to sign into it, so let's do it there.
For 100% Mac district, I do not have one of those evil, ugly Windows machines in my district.
Yep, absolutely.
So,
all right. So yeah, this is a pure HTML5 client. I'm running in Chrome, obviously. So let me just close out of this. And the same thing I was showing you earlier from the folder perspective. Oh, come on, Chrome. So I still have my student filing cabinet folder. All my folder views are all right there. So yeah, it is. Now there are some differences. I mean, this is a web app versus what we were talking about earlier. Anyone else all Mac? So some Windows in there? I know. So you can gloat now. Okay. But yeah. So from a functionality perspective, the only thing that's really different is on the scanning piece. So there's some things in scanning that are a little bit different between the two. Most of the other functionality is perfectly is all in the web client. And there's some admin things too. That's one of the other things that we would discuss about. But if you're hosted, it's a Citrix interface, so it's not, you don't really see that. You're not owning a Windows machine, but you may have to access one to do some administration pieces. Yep, absolutely. Okay, jumping back. So also from a retrieval perspective, and I'm just going to show you this very quickly. This just gives you a sense for how documents are organized in the software. So at the highest level, we have our document type groups, which all that means is basically the department. So how does it what does it make sense in your district, right? Do you want to store health records separately from just general student information, from IEP information, from, what makes sense? Because all of this is completely customizable. So when I look and say, okay, well, if I just click on student services as an example, I can see underneath that all the different documents that I have access to that are underneath that document type, right? So again, some things we're looking at, and then I can select if I'm going to retrieve some of these. I can just go through and say, okay, well, I can select a couple of those. If I want to search more granularly, I can go down and either do a full text search, which searches inside the document, or I can search using student ID, first name, last name, something along those things, even using greater than or less than values and so on and so forth. So if I want to say all of the students with last names starting with letter A, I can use A star, and this will pull up the list of all of those documents. Again, that I have access to. So based upon my role, if I don't have access to health records, I'm not even going to see them listed in the directory. And this view is what, again, differentiates us a lot from the attachment functionality. Like when I'm in attachments, I'm going in to view everything just at the individual student level. If I have access to this view, this search view, I can view things at a district level. So it greatly expands, and then I can take this information, run reports off of it, making sure I have all the documents that are necessary for us. Okay, any questions about that process? Okay, so who has a ton of filing cabinets full of paper now? It's okay to admit it, we're in a safe space. Okay, so I mean, every school district has their filing cabinets, and usually at this point in time, they're like, okay, this is all great, being able to store, categorize, and retrieve them, but how do I get that stuff in here, right? Okay, so a couple different methods of document importing, and I'm going to talk about a couple of them because they involve your systems. There's nothing really to demonstrate, and then we'll talk about scanning in just a minute also. So we showed drop and drag. Any of you guys using, are anyone receiving a lot of documents via email? Yeah, okay, all right. So from an email.
Can I ask something else really dumb?
Sure.
Probably has nothing to do with what you're talking about right now. Okay, but after you graduate, what happens to their files?
It's a very relevant question. Absolutely. And we'll get to it a little bit later on, if that's okay.
I keep asking ahead of time. I know.
No, it's okay. It shows you, yeah. Your brain's working in the session right after lunch. That is like it's a good sign, right?
I mean, do I have to print their file and file it now, or where does it go?
No.
Okay.
You definitely don't have to do that. So, and again, along those lines, even though we are a document management company, the worst thing we ever want to do, or what we really don't like to hear, is people having to print and then scan, or print and file. Like the print button is a really bad word for us, okay? If it's in a digital format, we want you to keep it in a digital format. So again, an email comes in with an attachment. We don't print the attachment, right? When we talk about electronic forms, the one thing I don't like about PDF forms, and every district has them. If you go to your website, there's like 15 different things. Some are in Excel, some are in Word, some are in PDF. And what ends up happening, they fill it out and hit the print button, right? And now I'm having to deal with paper. So we really want to take the paper usage out of the equation. When we talk about our integration and capturing documents, the two biggest sources of documents for us that are not paper are PowerSchool enrollment, or whatever your online enrollment product is, and PowerSchool itself. So when I run report cards, I don't want to have to print that giant file, especially 6 or 7 times, right? So what we want to do, and even like state reporting, I get this giant PDF full of all these documents. What do we do with that? So anything, any documents or group of documents that your district is receiving from either from another application or from the state that is in a PDF format, and even if it's not, but generally those are going to be PDF formats, we can automatically read the contents of those files and then break them apart into individual files and file them in each student's folder. Okay. It's not magic. We have a solution that will read in the document. It's looking for a key piece of identification. When that identification number changes, we say that's one document. We cut it, paste it, and send it on. Then we go read through the next, right? So is this a 1-page document or a 10-page document? It doesn't matter. We're going to grab it and import it automatically. That's with PowerSchool SIS. With PowerSchool enrollment, there's another integration where we're able to, as a batch process, download all of the documents that have been uploaded by parents through the enrollment process. And then we receive those in a file folder structure, and then we're able to read into that and grab the information and associate those documents with the student as well. And I can show you what that looks like, but if you've ever been in PowerSchool enrollment and you've downloaded that zip file with all those forms in it, Generally what it is the name of the document and the student ID, and that's all we need to categorize it appropriately. Any questions about that process? Okay, all right. Now, when we get into scanning, it's a little bit different. And scanning is just like printing, we really don't like to scan. It's just not what we want to do. And I say that only because scanning is an extra step, right? If it's an electronic document, keep it electronic. But in the event we have to scan, we'll make the process as easy as possible. So in this scenario, I obviously don't have a scanner, but I've got a bunch of documents that need to be, they've already been scanned, they're sitting in my folder, and they're waiting for me to figure out what to do with them. And in this instance, we have run these documents through our OCR process. And so the software has already sort of taken a look at the documents, figured out what they are, and has given us some suggested students' information to tie those documents to. So I can see here that this is a discipline report, and the software is showing me what student ID it pulled off of the document. Again, assuming there was a student ID on the document. A lot of times it's just first name, last name. And then I can go through and add any additional information that I may want to store around this document or around this student. Now, in this example, and almost invariably in all of these document import processes, we're just looking for one or two pieces of information. Okay? Now, we may want to categorize the document by a dozen pieces of information, but we're just looking for one or two. And the reason is we're going to let PowerSchool supply us with the rest of the information about this student. So if I have the student ID, then I can go and grab the rest of the information. If I have the student's first name, last name, I can go back into PowerSchool and fill in their homeroom, their teacher, anything else that I want to be able to use to store graduation date, things like that. So I don't want to have to scan this and then type it. Does that make sense? Now, if I do recognize that there's something on the document, so I'll drop down to the next document in the system. And so in this example, this is another document, and let's just say that I know this is already on here, so I want to capture the mobile number, right? So I can see that there's a phone number on the document, there's a homework number. If that's the mobile number, I don't have to type it, I just need to highlight it, and then it will automatically populate that piece of information also. So again, even though when I have to scan, if I can greatly increase the capture process, the indexing process, scanning becomes a lot more palatable to my users. Everybody follow that? What we're doing there? Okay, so all we're doing really is we're just trying to make it as easy as possible to capture the information and categorize it so it goes into the correct student folder on the back end. Okay, pretty straightforward. All right, I'm doing on time here. All right, so let's talk a little bit about some of the other features, functionality that you may not consider to be purely just document management, just going paperless, right? So one of the things we really want to make sure of is that if we have documents or we're trying to collect information via forms, we don't want to have to use the PDF forms that people print out. So one of the things we'll do is create electronic forms. We showed an example of one of those earlier. Let me jump back to my personal page here. And I'll show you just another quick example. This is something that it's a fairly common form that we implement for districts, and it's a supplemental registration form. So the situation is we've captured a lot of documents through the PowerSchool enrollment or something else, but there's still some other documents that either we didn't collect or that they collected and they were wrong. Instead of the proof of residency, they sent us a picture of an Amazon box on their front porch, right? That's one of my favorite examples. The proof of residency, really, that's where the creativity really starts to shine in our parents. I just love, all the things that we're seeing there. Okay, anyone got them better than that? Than the Amazon box?
I just had a lady write me a note. She left, came back 5 minutes later with a handwritten note that says, "I am living with my sister," or something, and then signed it.
Did the signature match your driver's license?
We didn't, but we just.
The handwritten note, I love it. That is, oh man, that's great. It would have been better if her mom had written it. I shouldn't say better, maybe more what you're used to seeing, right? I got a note from my mom, and I'll take this class. Okay, so just a quick example, some of the things we can do from an electronic forms perspective. And this is similar to other form design processes. The nice thing about our forms they're already device ready. So if you create them, you can drop them onto your website. You can put them in emails. You can drop them to your mobile. They look just as fillable on mobile devices. So and also these become records and part of the student's folder automatically. So the form, the data in the form. And then if we need to kick off a workflow process, right, because forms are like potato chips and everybody has one, that's my document management humor for the day. So that's all I got. Anyway, but so if you are, when these forms are entered into the district, we can then use the information here to determine what needs to happen. So if this is a supplemental enrollment document form, well, that's a pretty easy form. I'm just going to have someone check those, and then the whatever documents have been uploaded are going to be entered into the software. So again, I can have this information pre-populate. If I have a student ID, I can type it in there and pre-populate. And then they can use drop-down information, so on and so forth. And the forms can be very, very dynamic in how they appear. So if I want them to upload a photo ID and a health examination form, for example, then you can see the form is building out those specific areas based upon what needs to be uploaded, and then we can just upload the document there. That document and the form will become part of the student's file inside of the software. All right, and I'll show you this one also because it demonstrates a little bit more about the customization of this. But when we start talking about, and this is something that unfortunately we're implementing now for a school district in Texas. You guys may have found another way around this, but this is basically how they're managing threat assessments. So how do we capture potential threat information anonymously, and then what do we do with it? And so this is one of those little things where when we start talking, I said earlier that we use electronic forms and workflows beyond the SIS, beyond your student information system. This is something we're talking about. A lot of times this type stuff is managed in spreadsheets, and if they're more advanced, it's managed in maybe an Access database. So in this example though, we have a record of assigned responsibilities. This happens actually later on in the process. So if a threat has been identified, we determine that it is a credible threat, then what do we do about it and how do we manage it? And this is, so their process is they're going to have some sort of an intervention. And there's a lot of different things they need to do, how long it's going to take, how long it's going to happen, who's responsible for it, when it was completed. And so they're building a record in this form, right? This is not just something I'm going to fill out once and forget. This form is an active living document associated with this situation. And then obviously at any point in time in the process, we have signatures and things like that as well. So a lot of things we can do from a forms perspective that are beyond just like I'm just going to collect a little bit of information here and like a field trip approval form, right? These are things that we can do that are very, very dynamic inside the software. Okay, and building these is not something that requires your IT department to build. These things are drop and drag capable and very readily available for I would say power users at a minimum. But we do have a full scripting backend if you wanted to get really, really crazy with what form functionality looks like. Okay. I'm not going to submit that form for the 900th time. All right, so let's just take another couple quick looks. I mentioned earlier about having district-wide approach. So there is a full reporting backend into this also. And then we will get to your question about what happens when a student graduates. All right, so I mentioned earlier talking about looking at my district, and my apologies for the human resources example here, but the ability to see, okay, on a grade level, on a campus level, on a class level, what documents am I supposed to have but I don't have, right? And so we have the ability to build some fairly sophisticated dashboards and metrics and things like that. And I don't know why I've got the blue circle here going. Okay, and so this is just an example of a report that can be built and processed, just showing, again, missing documents. And the nice thing about it is interactive, so I can give people the graphical view. But if they want to dive in deeper, just by clicking on that individual pie square, it will sort everything else in the document once it finishes looking. So when I go through here, I'd say, okay, well, what in this department or whose document am I missing? I can click on that in that campus or that department, and it will actually show me, where I'm missing those records. So this information is also it's exportable immediately into Excel if you ever need access to it and share it with other people. This is more of just a kind of a flash or example of how granular these reports can be. And we can do things like geographic territory, so a map of your district, and then using heat maps and things like that to determine where information is coming from or where we may have deficiencies or things like that. So very, very sophisticated from a reporting perspective. And just to make sure that you know what's going on inside your district. And a lot of this is in PowerSchool, right? So we're not trying to recreate what they're doing. Sometimes, though, there are things that are going on inside of your district that may not be in PowerSchool, right? So if I want to take a look at maintenance records across school buses, right? How can I determine which ones are not up to date? And this provides you the ability to do that. PowerSchool hasn't done that yet, have they? Every time I come to one of these conferences, they're like, "Oh yeah, we bought this, we bought this, we bought this," and I'm like, "What's left? You guys are killing us." All right, let's talk a little bit about the final step we'll talk about here is what happens to all these documents and why are they, once they're in the software, how do I make sure that we're not storing them for longer or shorter than we're required to by the state. So districts get in trouble legally, both for not having the document, having gotten rid of it before you should have, and also for holding on to it longer than you should have. Now, student records holding on too long is generally not an issue, but when we get into things like finance and especially human resources, right? A lawsuit pops up. If you have records that you could have legally gotten rid of, you're now required to provide those records. Just so looking at, and this is an administration view. Let me close that out here. This is an administrative view of all of the documents in the system of a particular type. And again, these are employee records. My apologies, but I think it'll translate well. So this is everything that is being managed in the software, and where is it in the retention policy? So all retention policies, if you go to your state retention office, or if you have one, or I can't remember the name of what they typically call this, but they will have a document, and then they will have an event, and then they will give you a timeline. Okay? And the document names may not match up exactly with what you're looking at, but generally, so they will say this student document has a retention policy of 3 years after this happens, after enrollment, after graduation from this date, after departure from the district. So you have some sort of an event and a retention policy. That's exactly what our software is tracking for you. So every document that comes into the software will have you have the ability to say, okay, for all documents of this type in class, we're going to say that the event is graduation date. the event is enrollment date, whatever it is, and then you will set a retention schedule off of that. Okay, so and student records generally have, I mean, you know, for a lot of states they're 100 years. Some states are different, some states are shorter, but the cumulative records, the real important ones that you're required to keep, generally will be for, you know, well beyond your retirement date. Which means you may not have to worry about it, but no, just kidding. We want to be good stewards of this, right? Okay, so what we can do then is, and I'll just, as an example, if I'm the records management administrator, or if I'm managing a department, or even if I'm just trying to figure out what's going to happen at the end of graduation, I can go through and say, well, show me all the documents that are awaiting approval for destruction. So it's not just like we don't just go through and delete them. There's actually stages that have to happen for the documents before they're actually destroyed. If they make it through the approval process and they are destroyed, so I can see these two documents, I'll just show you an example of something we can do. We can go through and instead of just removing the document entirely, we'll automatically create, well, we will remove the document, but we will also create a certificate of destruction that gives the school district some information saying, look, you know, we had this document, it was kept for this long, and it was ultimately approved for destruction by this individual. So just the nice thing to know is nothing's falling through the cracks. If it's in our system, it's in our system, and we're going to manage the retention schedule. It's never going to look like grandma's attic where we just got anything and everything crammed into the software. And keeping that information up to date also makes the system more usable, and it makes the information more accessible because your users aren't trying to thumb through everything. Okay, any questions about what we've gone through so far? All right. Anyone in the middle of or thinking about doing some sort of a back file conversion? Like, I've got all of these, I'm going to do a massive scanning initiative for all of my filing cabinets. Anyone thinking about that? Anyone actively not looking at the filing cabinet so to avoid thinking about that? It's sitting in the corner and you're, maybe that'll go away. How long do I have to retire? Okay, if you find yourself at the precipice of having to deal with something like that, feel free to reach out to us. We've done this a number of different times. I can give you some strategies and some ideas and some thoughts. There's kind of 3 or 4 different paths you can generally take on that. And if you want any guidance in that direction, we can certainly provide that for you. And it's just, we've been doing this for long enough that we have an idea about what works and what doesn't work. Should you go all in? Should you go grade by grade or campus by campus? There's different schools and strategies for all of that, and it matters a lot. Like most school districts will underestimate the impact that a well-implemented document management system will have on the district. They just don't, they think this is one of those things where I'm just going to stand this up, it'll be like a digital filing cabinet and everyone will automatically start putting stuff in there and my paper will go away. And that would be awesome, but unfortunately we have all these two-legged things that walk around that have their own minds and ideas, and they're not called robots yet. But anyway, so in other words, keeping the people engaged and making sure that they understand why we're doing this. There's a lot of things that we can also help to make sure that the overall initiative is successful, not just having the best technology in the world, as you're well aware, and without having buy-in, it just leads to more headaches and then it solves problems. Also, and if I'll mention anything else, I guess this is more of an advice in the advice column for our conversation today. What also, if the school districts do underestimate, they underestimate the breadth of where documents reside. And I say this because I can't tell you how many districts we've gone into where they could have 3 different document management solutions. If you just look in the PowerSchool wheel of time or death, whatever thing they keep showing us, there's 7 different ways you can store documents just in the PowerSchool ecosystem. That's how many different applications. I mean, just think about what we talked about today. Store documents in PowerSchool enrollment, store documents in attachments, right? Store documents in talent ahead, store documents in, on and on and on and on and on. So the idea being is that we want to get all this in one location, and I only have one area or one solution I need to manage, and that's the idea. So that's where school districts get tripped up. Also, 1 or 3 people have this mission. They go out and they buy something without understanding if it'll work for the rest of the district. Also, okay. Any questions?
Is it HIPAA compliant?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So I say that generally when people in software companies say HIPAA compliant, what they mean is that if you implement it HIPAA compliantly, it'll be HIPAA compliant.
Right.
But from our perspective, absolutely. I mean, if you can run all the DOJ, Department of Justice, all the Department of Defense initiatives against it, it will stand up very well. The underlying product is called OnBase. We don't generally get into all the product stuff, but it's in use by 12,000 organizations worldwide. It is a very, very robust solution. Okay, any other questions?
Pricing.
It's priced by user. And so a lot of districts are like, why not by student? And the reason being is that you may have just a couple of people that want to get started with this, and that's completely fine. You can do that. You don't have to worry about a massive capital expense outlay to get started. You can get started with 4 or 5 users, and then it's all hosted, or it can be on premise if you want it to be there, and then we can go from there. Yep.